Hello, my name is Sheena with Rise Wellness, and this is Activate Your Genius. Thank you so much for being here. Today I am exploring Gene Key 2 from Richard Rudd's book, The Gene Keys. This is the shadow of dislocation. This is the gift of orientation, and this is the Siddhi or the highest destiny path of unity. So if you checked out last week's video, and no worries if you didn't, you can always check it out at some point during your contemplation this week, after this one, whatever you choose. But it's always great to see the programming partners along with the gene that you're studying, because it gives you a full picture, a full scope of how they complement each other and balance one another. So last week, this was the highest destiny path of beauty. This week, this is the highest destiny path of unity. So last week, we explored the fact that the hexagram in the I Ching for this last gene of beauty was all masculine. This week's hexagram is all feminine. This is all the yin. So we also discussed how there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Gene Key 1 and Gene Key 2 were swapped at some point in the order of things. But, and that makes sense. When you think about dislocation, you might think about dismemberment, being cut off. So, we come from the divine feminine. We come into this physical form from her. Why would we not start the journey there, right? So, I think about dislocation and this dismemberment as like physically like the umbilical cord being cut. That removes us. It gives us the illusion of disconnectedness from the female, from the mother. So this just seems like a natural place where we would start this journey at. And Richard Rudd would say in his contemplation of this gene that this dislocation could also just come to symbolize the fact that it's dislocated because chronologically it's put in the wrong place in the gene keys. So however you want to think about it, it's just interesting. But what this passage really comes to tell us is that even when we think that we've made missteps along the way, we've taken wrong turns and we've made the wrong choices, there's really no way that we can do that. You never actually lost your way. It's just a matter of perception. It's just an illusion. This whole dance has already been choreographed for us. There is no possible way to take a wrong turn. There's not a single moment of your life that wasn't perfectly in harmony with all of creation. And so there isn't even the possibility that you can make a wrong turn, even though I know certainly that it does feel like that sometimes. So when we started this journey in our evolution, we were a single-celled amoeba. We were operating from our reptilian brain, and eventually we took a quantum leap. We took a great leap in human awareness, and we started evolving to go from our animal instincts to go from our thinking brain. We started operating from our head. We became thinkers. And now we are reaching our zenith at this point as thinkers, and we're preparing for another great leap in human consciousness. And this means that we are going to be starting to operate from our heart center, our solar plexus. So this is so exciting when you think about us as like these operating systems. This is like the creme de la creme of an upgrade to start moving from our head to our hearts. And as we go into all of these gift states, that's really always the journey in every single one, is coming from that reptilian brain, moving to that place of logic, and then cutting off from all of those and operating more from a love place, from a heart place. So what's interesting is these genes are always so full of paradox, right? So even though we have always been connected to nature, we've always been one with everything, we go through this feeling, and a lot of it is because of the collective consciousness that we're in, that we feel disconnected from nature. So one of the dilemmas of this shadow frequency is we start feeling like we have this fear that humanity itself is going to destroy itself, like we're going to destroy the planet. And we can't really argue one way or the other, it just is. But in this way that we think that we're destroying our planet, that means that we're separating ourselves from the planet to think that we have the power to solely destroy it. They would have to simultaneously be either evolving or being destroyed because we're not separate from it, right? So I had a conversation with someone recently that I still come back to thinking about all the time because I loved it so much. And this gene makes me think about it again is, what if instead of this climate crisis that we say that we're in with all the modern technologies and the evolutions that we've come through, it's the earth is just changing. We're just having a climate change, and it's actually restoring itself and putting itself back into equilibrium. And that's why the ice caps are melting. And I just felt like it was really an interesting concept. And I love that, because why would we think that we're separate from the consequences of the earth? Why would we not think that we're all going through this evolutionary change together? So at the end of the day, when we think about this gene, it's all about operating from a place of connectedness, a place of trust. And this, again, is all about that yin energy of trust, of unity, of receiving, of surrender. And when we operate out of trust, we create more energy. But when we operate out of fear, we deplete our energy source. And in both cases, these have a magnetic field around that's felt in our environment. So when we're operating out of trust, we're simply entering the flow, and we experience synchronicities all over the place. However, when we're operating out of fear, everything is going to feel disharmonious, like you've knocked yourself out of the flow. Since the gift of this gene is orientation, the shadow of this fear frequency then feels like you're disoriented. It feels like you're missing opportunities, and you end up in repetitive patterns that can honestly just get very draining. So Richard Rudd says that, this is a long quote that I'm going to mostly read. It says, the second shadow of dislocation is an integral part of the script of life. It actually allows you to experience being out of the universal flow, even though this experience is an illusion. Ultimately, even the level of frequency that courts chaos is a part of the overall fabric of existence. The second shadow allows you to witness your own helplessness as you seek to escape the feeling of dislocation and loneliness. As soon as you enter deeply into this shadow world with your full and honest awareness, it magically begins to change. This shift in your inner honesty precipitates a leap out of the mind and into a newer and far more expansive awareness. One needs to really grasp this insight. You do not change your reality through doing anything. There's a perceptual shift pre-wired into the DNA of every human being. And when it's activated, it occurs in spite of you as an aspect of your biological evolution. At a certain point, your new awareness simply begins to open up. It does so gradually at first, but over time, it coincides with a remarkable improvement in the quality of your life. As you see it, so it changes. So the I Ching hexagram translation of this gene is the word field, which really is a beautiful way to describe this gene, because it's the universal field that we live in. It's to move in harmony. This field is to be oriented. When we move out of harmony with the field, that's when we feel the dislocation. That's when we feel the disorientation. So the masculine shadow frequency is all about distrust, separation, and force, while the feminine approach is based on unity, surrender, and trust, which are all hallmarks of a higher frequency. And that serves even more as evidence that this yin makes more sense at the beginning of the I Ching. So in a repressive nature, these people are lost. And this gene is so collective that it makes up such a pivotal place in our genetic blueprint that whether or not it's shown in your hologenetic profile, everyone will have a deep resonation with this gene because it's such an integral part of the human journey. It describes the state of mankind as a whole and describes being lost as being out of alignment with one's true universal destiny. So this is the path of materialism and selfishness, and it has no regard for the greater environment. It's our true destiny to awaken out of our state and into our universality. But if you have no spiritual connection to life, you might feel really lost and experience misery and suffering because at some point life seems to have no purpose. So you're always just kind of floundering about, you know. We all need something to hold on to. We need something to hope for. We need this belief that there's something bigger, something greater than us. And if we don't have that, then, you know, there's a really good chance that we just become really lost, honestly. So in a reactive nature, these are the people that are really regimented. So the dilemma of this shadow is agenda. So the reactive nature typically stems from a deep unresolved anger, which is usually the case in most of these genes. These people want to enforce a structure over everything. And the dilemma of this shadow is having an agenda in this type of regimentation describes many of the world's great religions, which puts themselves between an individual and their direct experience with the divine. So at some point, this regimentation can describe science, where it also attempts to organize life into some form of meaningful and logical framework. Anything that tries to control life and pin it down emerges from the second shadow. And it's not to say that religion and science are bad or wrong, except when they serve to obscure the hidden agenda and keep people moving from the knowing that divinity lies within them, and it tries to separate them from that. So the true purpose of life then is not only found in one's heart, but it's in the mystical experience of moving in perfect synchronization with all that there is. So the second gift, this is the gift of orientation. So if the shadow is disorientation, this gift now comes about being reoriented. So this might come from maybe you had a spiritual teacher that showed you a new mysticism. Maybe you started going to therapy. Maybe you had a personal crisis. Or maybe one day you just got tired of your own shit and you decided, at this point, I'm going to start my inward healing journey. And this journey really is about turning inwards and saying that, you know, you're tired of operating from the way that you have and you want to make a change. Eventually, all human life goes through an evolution inside your DNA. And some people go through it really suddenly. It just happens, you know, they just automatically go through the spiritual awakening and this enlightenment. You know, so for others, this comes in a shift in actions that change their perception, and maybe this came from you, from a shift in perception that changed your actions. It really doesn't matter what the order in which you experience this shift, but once you come into the flow, that's when you start to begin to experience all these synchronicities. When you're in the flow, make no mistake, you know that you're in the flow. And when you're out of the flow, make no mistake, you know that you're out of the flow. So once you start moving through life, through this yin energy of trust, you start operating at your highest biological level through your solar plexus system. And life just gets easier. You're in the rhythm. You're dancing through it with this new perspective, this greater awareness, and life simply becomes more magical. So this gene combined with the eighth gift makes up the codon ring of water. So at this point in your gift state, you develop your own way of living that looks different from everybody else. It's so contagious to everyone around you. There's a real magnetic quality to these genes. And we learned about this with the eighth gift of style, because these are the people that are like magnets and really strong in their ability to attract abundance and prosperity. They really, it's all about the law of attraction and the magnetic frequency around this gift state. So being that this is the codon ring of water, here we are back to having that same magnetic field. You know, one of the things about water is, you know, it can mold and adapt and change to any vessel that you put it in. It's so mutable. And this gift state of this orientation, combined with the eighth gift of style is really like you're starting to experience life in such a unique way that only you can. And you're not here to be a leader per se, although you can be. You just don't care about how other people perceive you. It's not about that for you. It's about, just enhancing your own uniqueness, which is another paradox, because as you step into your own uniqueness, you are also realizing your oneness around, with everything around you. So, like I said, there is a magnetic field to this gift that makes you a powerful attractor. Now, there's literally a chemical that's found in the tissue of your pineal gland called magnetite. And magnetite suggests that all animals have a built-in GPS, like a magnetic guidance system that keeps them in alignment. So as this gift rises, you live more harmoniously and the electromagnetic power of your aura increases. The more you surrender to the feminine yielding energy of this gift, the more universal power flows through you. So much so that the moment you find yourself out of harmony in your body tells your brain, and your brain knows. You know, like I said, when you come out of the flow, there's a gut feeling, the solar plexus that you feel that says something's not right. And this is your body playing that little radar detector to tell you something's off balance, something doesn't sit right. One of the biggest takeaways from this gene is that fear is safe. If you start to feel that disharmonious feeling that something is off, that's your fear telling you, let's check the fact, let's research what we're doing, let's pay more attention, let's be more in our body and aware of what's happening, because that fear doesn't have to alarm you. It's just an indicator. It's just a sensor going off in your brain that says, pay more attention. If this doesn't feel right, don't stay here. Maybe don't talk to this person. Maybe separate from this, whatever it looks like. But that fear is just part of your operating system indicating you that something feels off. Whereas when you are in the universal flow of everything, you just feel so in harmony with your body, and your body is just flowing. You're just seeing synchronicities all over the place. So people experiencing this gift are so deeply surrendered that they can be really empowering. They can actually intuitively sense who is in the flow and who is resisting the flow. So the second Siddhi is unity. This is the highest destiny path of unity. So this second Siddhi describes the experience of enlightenment or awakening. It is the foundation of the essence of the divine feminine. So this divine feminine is all about mystery. It goes beyond reason. It goes beyond understanding. And at the Siddhic level, we even move beyond duality, which gets destroyed by a strange kind of divine logic. At the heightened level awareness, even mathematics works differently than on the mental level. So in divine mathematics, 1 + 1 never equals 2. 2 actually becomes more of a bridge that is immediately transformed, because when you have 1, which is consciousness, and you add something else to it, you now form a relationship, which means that you go into 3. So say, for example, you have a man and you have a woman. You immediately have a couple, you have a relationship. So there is no 2, there's always going to be 3. So in divine mathematics, you don't have the number 2 except to serve as a bridge. There's only 2 numbers, it's 1 and 3. There's always a relationship that's formed. We go beyond this duality. Every duality is a relationship, and every relationship is really a 3. The man, the woman, and the couple. So when it comes to this Siddhic nature, oneness can't really be comprehended. It can only be lived. So enlightenment is not an experience, which is a great line to meditate on. If you see oneness as something that you have to attain, you have jumped back onto the shadow frequency because you've disconnected yourself from it, right? So transcendence doesn't take you away from life. It puts you right into the heart of life where you've always been. So it simply unifies you. So due to the magnetic nature of this gift frequency, these people quite literally change the direction of the earth as it moves through space. So this Siddhi can only be born if the world is making a leap of consciousness. And this means that we need these geometric coordinates, or as I say, these portals, to line up in the cosmos. And, we learned about it in 2012. There was this time where we were aligned, our geometric aspect of the cosmos aligned, and so we had this collective, we didn't have an awakening, but we did heighten our consciousness in 2012. The Gene Keys would say the next big great year for this would be 2027. If you watch my video on Gene Key 55, we explored what that looks like. But I'll just say that that's a really exciting evolutionary quantum leap that we will undergo in 2027. And it can also be argued or speculated that there is more of those prior to that keeps changing our state of consciousness. So, I kind of just energetically feel this happening as we just feel like a collective awakening is happening. There's a shift in consciousness, and I'm just excited to see how that unfolds and where that goes. But this heightened consciousness, it would affect us collectively rather than individually. So it needs these portals, it needs these geometric times of space for that energetic pull on us to shift. So the second Siddhi is referred to in Catholicism through the parable of the Bethlehem star. So when we think about the Bethlehem, we think about, this home, this star, and this, when we're talking about dislocation, we were never really dislocated, and we can always look at the stars to guide us home. So according to the I Ching, as I said, we're expected to experience a major shift in 2027, which opens up to another genetic shift in our humanity. So while all mythic journeys begin by leaving the warmth of and the comfort of our mother and our home, it all ends with us returning home to that same embrace. And that is our final destiny of our species, to realize our state of oneness and unity in all there is. So this is returning back to mother, returning back to source. There has been a lot of speculation over the years that God or source is this masculine energy. There's a lot that would say it's a feminine energy. We came from, we return back to this female master creator, this oneness, this source. So, it's funny how in all the books and all the stories that we read, it always comes back to this journey of coming home. We start off at the beginning of the journey leaving home, and it's all of our passage returning back to home, whatever that is, that place of love. I don't know if you have watched Wizard of Oz as an adult, but it's so full of symbolism. It's really fun to rewatch that movie as an adult, to see it as the path to enlightenment, where Dorothy goes through this twister and has this dream, and she embarks on this journey in search of the embodiment of all of these traits of courage, of heart and love, of intelligence. She goes to the Emerald City, which green chakra, the heart chakra, is green. She is wearing her ruby red slippers. When we look at the color ruby, that red, it's our foundation, it's our root. It's our home, it's where we start from. There's no place like home. When we get rooted, that is when we feel our oneness, when we go back to our mind, body, spirit connection, we integrate ourselves. If we did become disoriented along the way, at some point we have to reorient ourselves. And for many of us, that means reintegrating that mind, body, soul connection. So, I always have, a personal journey that I share and how these genes have been reflected in my life. And of course, this one's no different. And this one's a big one because, this is the path to enlightenment. So this is thinking about the trials and tribulations that we've undergone. So for me, I was contemplating in my early 20s how I got that feeling major of this disorientation, and how that showed up for me was when I was in my early 20s. I got into a relationship with someone that I was friends with. So we had a foundation, and once we got into the relationship, the dynamic of that relationship changed quite a bit, and he became really abusive. And I ended up having to leave the relationship, and once I did, he started stalking me. So I did the things that one has to do in those situations. I had to change my job, I had to change my cell phone number, got a protection order, and I moved. So, I made all the right steps that I thought that I needed to make, and some months go by while I'm recovering from the abuse from the relationship. And I'm in bed one night to hear this loud bang, and a moment later, he's on top of me. He had found out where I lived, broke into my second-story apartment, and within seconds was able to rip the balcony right off the hinges, come through my locked apartment into my locked bedroom, and attack me. And it was such a disorienting experience for me, where my mind, in order to preserve self-preservation, can do so many irregular things, but my mind went offline, my body went offline. And through the trauma that I experienced in that false imprisonment and all the inhumane acts that happened during that experience, I just simply disconnected from myself. Now, I had gone to therapy, and I had done this, and some time had passed, I had done that, and kind of moved on with my life. I definitely suffered PTSD from it, where I had a lot of nightmares and was afraid to be alone at night, and just different experiences that can happen after someone is attacked in the comfort of their home and they have the illusion of safety and they're asleep. So even though all this time had passed, 10 years later, I find myself in an abusive marriage with someone who is also falsely imprisoning me and abusing me in every way. And I had to, in getting out of that relationship, really check in with myself to say, like, what do I need to heal? How do I get to the thick of all of these issues, the root of all of this suffering, so that I never have to experience any of this again? Because I don't think that I'll make it through another one of these experiences. Both of them, in their own ways, were deeply traumatic and required a lot of healing from, which I only tell these stories because I took those years, that time to do the healing. So this gene for me, in contemplating that, reminds me that the way that I was actually able to integrate my mind, body, and spirit was through a regular yoga practice. Sometimes that meant just lying on the mat and crying, and sometimes that meant getting into the postures and moving, and sometimes that meant just breathing. And all of these things on a regular basis became how I was able to get fully connected and experience that oneness in my own body. So what happens to a lot of us in our lives, and we go through these traumatic experiences and we become disoriented, we become lost. And as I said before, we end up in these repetitive cycles. I didn't realize that I was in this repetitive cycle. I thought, I've been to therapy, I've done all this work, I've moved again, I've changed my phone number again, I have a new place that I lived, I have new friends, I have, he is now, serving time, and I have a lifelong restraining order on both of them, and all of these things. I thought, I moved past these experiences, only to have 10 years go by to end up in a very similar situation where I had to ask myself, like, how did I get here? And, so for me, that turned into this inner journey. So when I invite you to activate your genius this week, I invite you to explore, some of these experiences that might have made you feel lost for a time, with no agenda or no direction. And maybe you went the other direction, and I certainly did for a time, where I became so regimented. I had no time for play. I had no time for boredom. And as we learned last week with the shadow of entropy, boredom is an essential part of our lives, because from boredom stems this creativity that flows through us. But we have to get into the right place that it naturally flows. Otherwise, if we rush the process, then we might end up with just like a ho-hum, piece of art. It hasn't truly had the time to emerge the way that it was meant to. So I really just invite you this week to think about, where you're at. If you're feeling lost, if you're feeling so regimented that you have no time to get lost, and be playful on an adventure, and have some boredom in your life. One of the things that I did this week to tune into my feminine energy was I took a vow of silence for a day, which I know is not ideal and not for everyone, and not something everybody can do. But I wanted to just tune into that yin energy that's all about receiving and listening and trusting and surrendering. And that experience was so much fun, because I just got to spend time with animals, and I got to listen more and more actively, and instead of worrying about, or thinking about how am I going to respond, or, sending, fruitless texts. It was just, let me be so present and trust that all the answers are going to come to me. And, the conversations that I meant to have, I'll have tomorrow, and it's fine. So the highest destiny path of this gene is, of course, unity. So another way that I invite you to activate your genius this week is really immerse yourself in a collective experience, whether it's for meditation, or it's for a group gathering, a sweat lodge, an ecstatic dance, a yoga class. I just invite you to experience the oneness that comes with being in a group of like-minded people. And, because I do have a bias coming from the holistic wellness field, I would really invite you to do this in some kind of spiritual practice, if it's available to you. And that is, going to a yoga class, or group meditation, or, a spiritual workshop or retreat of some kind. But really just collecting energies with other people that are on similar paths, or I just invite you to experience the oneness. And it doesn't have to be in a group. I mean, you can also have just as deep, if not deeper, an experience of oneness by going out into nature and, looking to see how your fingerprint looks like the rings on that tree, or like the back of that turtle shell, and looking at all the patterns found in nature, and seeing the sacred geometry of how they're also found in your biology, and just paying more attention to that, listening more, just being more mindful, more aware. I invite you to trust, to surrender. If you have found yourself lost along the way, give yourself credit for how far you've come. We don't always take the time to look back in reverence to say, damn, that was really hard and I got through it. It's time to pat yourself on the back for those experiences that you've made it through. So, this gene might potentially bring up some heavy things. I know it brought up some heavy things for me, but I knew that I've already rewired those scripts. So yes, they were traumatic experiences at one point in my life, but thankfully I've healed from them. So as I brought them back up, I experienced a new kind of oneness. And I'll even share about that is, when I went back to think about the people that had abused me in my life, number one, I was vibrating on their frequency, like attracts like. So there was something in me that was attracting that. And I know from doing this shadow work as long as I have, that there was a rocky foundation that I started from, going back to things I experienced in childhood, and a real lack of self-love. And when I didn't feel that worthiness of love, I was going to attract all these people that also didn't feel like I was worthy of love. And what's really interesting about the two abusive relationships that I had in my life was that, the first one was a Black man who had been oppressed and grew up around a lot of racism. And so once our friendship had evolved into a relationship, that's when he had all these inadequacies and all of these phobias, these insecurities that result in him going from being the oppressed to the oppressor in the situation. And then I was married to a man from Mexico that had to flee his country because it was too dangerous for him to be there. He had to leave everyone and everything behind and start over in a brand new place, speaking a language he didn't even know, and, robbed of the safety of his own home. And now between these two people, I got robbed of the safety in my own home, and not just in my home, but in the home my vessel, my body. And so, at the end of the day, when I go back to experiencing this oneness, I can say that between being the oppressor, between not feeling safe in your home and fleeing your country, all of us were having the same experience that manifested in these different ways. We all became a victim of our circumstance. And that is really the victim consciousness of this gene. It's a victim of our external consequences, and it's thinking that we made a wrong turn. It's thinking that we did something wrong. It's thinking that we fell out of harmony, out of whack. And when we elevate our consciousness into these heightened places, we add more mindfulness to it, we start to see that it was all an illusion. I never made a wrong step. Part of my journey required me to step into the shoes of a Black man, to step in the shoes of a Mexican man, and see the ways in which they felt unsafe in their homes. They felt unsafe in their bodies. And I too had to experience that feeling in order to relate to it in a different way. So, life is messy, life is weird, life is hard sometimes, but, at some point we have to return back to our mother's loving embrace. And that is a path to enlightenment. All are welcome here, all are forgiven, and it starts with self. We can't forgive the people around us until we forgive ourselves. So I really just invite you to take that time this week to celebrate you, to celebrate the journey that you've undergone and the trials and tribulations that have made you who you are. So maybe this gene is just surrendering, and it's just operating with more love and trust. Or maybe it is journaling these things. Maybe it is going back into a meditative place and doing some inner child work and seeing, where is your foundation at this point? Has it been rocked off kilter? Do you have some work to do to go back to experiencing, this oneness? Like Glinda the Good Witch says, you've always had the power, my dear. So I just really invite you to step into that power this week and be proud of everything that you've overcome. The journey to enlightenment is the passage of moving through your heart, of making all the choices from your heart. It's giving up any hidden agendas and living your life so transparent. It's seeing the unity in every living thing, and everything is living. And you are a part of that. You are not disconnected from nature. You are one with it. So lots to explore this week, lots of ways to activate your genius. I thank you so much for being here. I love you so much. I appreciate taking this journey with you. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you give it a comment. You can also follow me on Instagram at Rise Wellness Coaching. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how these genes are showing up in your life and all the synchronicities that you're having. You know, once you go into the flow, you know you're in the flow because everything is just happening. These amazing synchronicities are happening all over the place. You just think of something and it appears. It's so magical. It's so magical. And I just want to bring everybody on this journey of removing yourself from the victim consciousness. You know, you're not a victim. You're not even a survivor. You are a creator. Every single thing that you go through, you have created these experiences. These are all providing tools for this human journey. They might seem like you've been knocked off kilter, like you've fallen out of harmony, but it's an illusion. It's all an illusion, and it's just an illusion so that you continue to explore, you continue to learn new things, and at the end of the day, we came from love and we are returning back to love. And between now and 2027, I cannot wait for more of these portals to open, for more of this heightened consciousness to happen in the collective as we operate into these Siddhi levels. It feels really within reach that this second Siddhi of unity becomes a reality for us sooner than later. So thank you for taking this journey with me. Like I said, I love you so much. Namaste.